Hi friends, and welcome to my studio. My name is Tammy Ernest and I am a long arm quilter, and here on my channel I like to share customer finishes as well as my own personal projects. So I'm really glad you're here today. So today I'm going to give you some updates on my Pressed Flowers Quilt Along. This comes in the Sew Sampler monthly subscription box from the Fat Quarter Shop, and I have finished the first two blocks, and so I thought I would share that with you. So last time I think we talked about my color selection. So this is a very blurry printout of the fabric requirements for the entire quilt along. So the Pressed Flowers Quilt Along is a monthly quilt along, but it's a mystery. So each month in the Sew Sampler box, you receive the directions to do one quilt block. At the end of the 12 months, then they give us setting instructions to finish the entire quilt. So if you go on Fat Quarter Shop and you look for the first block pattern, you can buy these individually, or if you subscribe to the subscription box, then this comes in your box each month. But you can get these patterns individually on their website. If you go to the where this first block is and you swipe to the second picture, then it gives you the fabric requirements. It may be that way on every block. I haven't looked. I just know on the first block they at least give that. And so there is also a kit available, and it is using a Bunny Hills design fabric line. And I am using a similar color scheme, but I have gone with a little more brown. So you can see this first, or you can see from this first block, we've got some rosy colors, some pink colors, and then their colorway for this part of the block is more of a gray. This is a gray gingham, almost a grayish, the grayish side of brown. And I have decided that I wanted to make my quilt a pink and brown quilt. So I printed out the fabric requirements, and then I grabbed a bunch of fabrics from my stash, and I have added a few extras from the quilt store to finish off at least just this top part. So the top part gives you what you will need, the fabric requirements for the blocks. The bottom part gives you fabric requirements for finishing the entire quilt. I'm going to hold off on that until I see the finishing at the end of the 12 months to decide if I've got fabrics in my stash that I can use for this part, or if I'll need to buy some others. So what I have done is I grabbed the fabrics that I could from my stash, and so this first one, and then I have labeled them all so that I know which one to pick when I get the quilt instructions. So this first one says you need 3.5 yards of this SKU number, which is a Bunny Hills design SKU number, but I've just looked at it and it looks like it's a creamish color. So I pulled from my stash and found this whole set of 2.5-inch strips that were all a creamish color. It's like a creamish background with a white on top of it. And these are all different designs, but they all match each other. And so I decided I wanted to use this for the white in the blocks, but some of the pieces that you need to cut for the blocks are wider than 2.5-inch strips. So what I did was head to the quilt store, and I bought just 1 yard of this print here. So I did take along some of the 1.5-inch strips so that I could make sure I matched, and it matches pretty close. And these are all different flowered themes, but different designs, you can see. And so I picked out for my yardage, it does have a nice floral tone on tone type of feel. And I got 1 yard because only thing I'm cutting from this fabric is the pieces that are larger than 2.5. So like for the two blocks that I just finished, there was some 4.5-inch pieces, there was some 3.5 by 6.5-inch pieces, and so that's what I cut from this fabric. So then I had some from my stash. Let me show you. I think these were all prints from my stash. Okay. These were all pinks that I pulled from my stash that I had. Now this one is like a light brown floral print, and that's what I'm using for the second one that is used for the leaves in the blocks. So I have some rosy colors, a little medium color pink, and then I have a lighter pink. This is a light pink with some fronds, leafy type prints, and then I have another darker rosy color. And these I all had from my stash, varying sizes, but I think they'll all work. And then I needed a few more. So when I went to the quilt store to get the white on white, then I also picked up this darker brown. This chocolate brown, I really like this one. I really like this one. If I would have thought, I would have got a second one of these and I would have used it instead of this one, but I think this one's gonna work. You can see how they complement each other, but I really like this chocolate brown with the pinks. And then I picked up two other pinks, kind of in the medium range of pinks. These are really cute. All right, so you'll notice my little tag on there, and what I have done, I laid out all my fabrics, and then I laid them out. I didn't look at each one of these on the computer or online. Instead, I just kind of laid them out and said, okay, here's a lighter pink, a lighter pink, a lighter pink. This one was a grayish one. I did look that one up, I think. And some rosier pinks. And then this one was it was more of a grayish print online too. So I laid out my fabrics, and then I labeled them on this printout, and then I labeled them on my fabrics. Okay, and so I just pinned them on, just labeled each one. And the reason I did that is because on the back of the directions for each one of these block of the months, they show you the SKU number, which correlates to the SKU number on here. And that's how you know which fabric that you need, and then they give the cutting instructions below that. So by matching this SKU number, then I can look on here and say, okay, if it's this SKU number, which this one's pretty easy because it's the white on white, there's no other one like that. But if it gives me this SKU number or this SKU number, I know that that is my F fabric, and I can go through the stack that I have and find my F fabric, and then I can cut those at the size that are needed. So that is my whole colorway. Let me hold these up again so you can see. I had a lot more pinks in my stash, but there are so many different colors of pink. There's so many different ones. So this is what I have. Because I would hold some up and they were too purple, and others I would hold up and they were too pale or they were too bright, and they were so many different pinks, but these I feel like they all coordinate. So that's what I'm using for this quilt along. We've done 2 blocks, so it started in April, May, I believe. And so it started in April, May was the second one, we'll get a third one here in June. So this quilt along will go all the way through next March, and then we'll get the quilting or the setting instructions for those. So I wanted to show you the first block. This one is called Delphinium. Each of these blocks measures 12.5 inches square. So I want to give you just some tips and some pointers on these. Even if you're not making this specific block, if you're doing something with these type of squares in them. So let me show you. So on the quilt, we're gonna put it on point, but when you create the block, you're actually making it like this. So right here, on all of these, you can see we're doing easy corner triangles on these pieces right here. So this is a square, and then you're taking a smaller square and putting that little white smaller square, layering it on top of the rosy one, and then you're stitching across there. That's both of the sides on this block. Here is a 6.5 inch length, and you're doing that on all 4 sides of that one. So just a little hint, when you're doing these easy corner triangles, most often when you see directions for doing easy corner triangles, they will tell you to stitch across it, to trim off the extra, and then to press your corner back. I always press my corner back prior to my trimming the seam allowance. And the reason is because this back fabric right here, it is already square. I know that it's square, you know, this is a rectangle, but what I mean is it's already on point right here. It's already got the right angles right here. So if I stitch across right here with my easy corner triangle and then I press that back, I always take that top one and I press it back right to the corner of that background fabric. And so I know when I press it, even if my stitching wasn't exact, I know when I press it back that I am getting it square with that background fabric, and that's where I want it to be. I find that if you trim the seam allowance first and then fold that back, that you're gonna press it back with your stitch line, and that may not always be square. So by doing it this way, I don't have to square up my block later. I know that it's square because I pressed this top piece back and lined it up with the background fabric. Once that is pressed and cooled, then I trim the back 2 layers of the seam allowance. I leave this top piece, the white one, but underneath that you will have the other half of the white piece, and you'll also have the background fabric behind that. So I will trim those off. Now, when you trim those off, if they're large enough, you can always save those and put them in your scrap bins. These weren't large enough because I think these are only 1.5 inch squares right here that you're using for the easy corner triangles. But if you're doing a larger one, sometimes you're doing blocks and you'll have a 2.5 inch easy corner triangle. And when you trim that seam allowance, if there's enough to cut a little 1.5 inch square out, I will do that, put that over in my next to my sewing machine for a small project that I'm working on, and then throw away the extras. But always make sure when you trim, if you can save just even a block or two, and save them for future projects. And that's something Lori Holt does, and then she even shows you how to make, through that Scrappiness is Happiness book, how to use all those little pieces. So that's my first hint in making blocks like that. Second of all, if you see this block right here, it's a square right here, but it has the triangles. Now in the directions for this block, they have you take a 4.5 inch square, and I've already cut it. They have you take the 4.5 inch square. I should have brought a design board and put it on there. They have you take a 4.5 inch square and then cut it in 4 diagonals so that you get the 4 pieces like this. So I'll hold up 2 of them. So they have you cut the 4.5 inch square and then cut the pieces, you know, in both directions diagonally, so you end up with 4 triangles. And then they have you do that with the white, and then they also have you do that with the brown, and then you join these together. So pretend this one is the brown one. You would join those together and open it up. You would do that with 2 others and split those apart. I do not like doing these blocks like that because you're sewing on the bias, and that is so stretchy. And I just don't like that method. So I did a little mock-up so I could show you how I actually do those blocks. So you can cut the squares the same, just as it's called for, because they were trimmed down to a smaller size anyway. So you can cut the squares 4.5 inches. These are actually 5, but I'll use this as an example. I have two colors that I'm using. And I have cut these are 5.5 inch, these are 5 inch squares. I just pulled them out of my scrap bin. And so I'll take 2 5.5 inch squares. I will layer them on top of each other. And then I will stitch a 1/4 inch away from that diagonal line on both sides. Now you can draw your diagonal line with a pencil if you want to. I don't. I just line this up with the guides on my sewing machine. And you can see it better on the blue. So I stitch down either side, so your diagonal line would run in between there with a pencil line or just judge it, and then I stitch a 1/4 inch away from that on both sides. Then I take those 2, cut them apart. So let me show you this. So if I stitch that there and then I cut them apart, then when I open this side, that gives me 2 of these. So I have 2 of these. That's exactly what this is. This is just that square cut apart. So now I have 2 of them. Now what I'm going to do is take these 2 pieces and I'm going to layer them the blue on the yellow and the yellow on the blue. I'm going to line up those seams. So, so this seam right here, it's lined up right with the seam underneath it. You can see that. I will line those up, make sure they're square here. I don't care, you know, those little doodads at the end don't bother me. But then I will pin this right on that seam allowance, just to keep, because I want to keep that together. Right there. I'll do the same thing on the other side. I line up the edges. I have the yellow over the blue and the blue over the yellow. I'll line up those edges. I will pin right on that seam allowance. Now what I do is I take this to the sewing machine and I stitch. You can draw that diagonal line right here and I stitch either side of that. And this is what that looks like. So imaginary diagonal line, I stitch 1/4 inch on either side of that, and then I cut that apart right there. And that is what this looks like. So this is what it was stitched. I cut those two apart. Now when I open this, I have the block. And I've not had to sew on the bias at all. Much quicker. To me, it's much more accurate. My points are really, really close, if not right on. Now this, I would press open. I would press the seams open on the back. And then I would take this to my cutting table and I would trim it. The size that it needed to be trimmed to for the block was 3.5 inches. Now how I don't want to just set my ruler over here and cut 3.5 inches, because then my X right here would not be in the middle of the block. So what I want you to think about is, if this is going to be a 3.5 inch square, okay, half of 3.5 would be 1.75. So and I didn't bring my ruler, I should have done that. If I take my square ruler and I put, you know, the ruler right here, and I'm going to use my diagonal line that's on my ruler, and I'm going to put this point right here where 1.75 is on that ruler. And then I can see where, then I would trim it here and here. I would flip it the other way, put that 1.75 right there on that point again, and I would trim this side. And then I have a full 3.5 inch square. I feel this is much easier than to do working with the bias strips here and joining them together. And like I said, they have you cut these pieces 4.5 inches. And so you can cut these 4.5 inches as well, layer them on top of each other and do each step like I just showed you, and then trim it up at the end and you'll have the same piece. I just feel this is so much easier. And then let me show you the block itself and how mine turned out. So this is called delphinium, and like I said, in the quilt, in the block itself, I'm sure we're going to turn it on point because that's the way the picture looks on the front. But you can see these blocks right here. That's how I did these right here. Instead of working on the bias, I just did it that way. This is just a 4-patch. Here are the easy corner triangles, and you can see on the back that I trimmed my seam allowance after pressing that back. Such a cute block. Really is cute, and I really am liking the roses and the pinks and then that chocolate brown. So this was the first month. This is block number 1. This is delphinium. Block number 2 is called hyacinth. Now this block was much easier. Here it is on point. If I turn it sideways, you can see I just have square, 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 square. This is one longer piece, but you could have done it 2 squares as well. This one is a really cute way to make these leaves because these were just easy corner triangles pressed over. So very quick. This one went much quicker than the first block did. And I will show you my finished block. So this one uses that light brown print that I showed you, and because it is darker than the white on white print that I chose, it does stand out there and just a little bit different dimension. Really cute. It's so funny how one block, it can change from being, you know, you hold it this way and then put it on point. So the 2 blocks together. I do like the chocolate. I like the chocolate brown, but it'll be a nice contrast there. So the first 2 blocks are done. And this is a very easy block of the month to stay up with because it's only 1 block per month and really half an hour. The second block, half an hour. The first one a little bit longer just because I was doing it in my own directions and figuring out the measurements for you so that I could show that to you. And then also because I was making these samples as well. So a really easy one to keep up with. If you, like I said, if you aren't subscribed to the box, then you can purchase these patterns individually and do that one along with me. All right, I wanted to give you an update on another project I was working on. I have shown you this pattern for using vintage textiles. You can see part of it here. And I've been working on this for a client, and I was able to meet with the client this past week and get some more textiles, more pillowcases and table toppers from her. So this is how much of the quilt I had done so far. I have 2 rows done. Let me just show you one section here. So I have 2 rows done. This was from a pillowcase that we had. And I was using, this is the biggest square. And then you have smaller squares or rectangles here. And I was just using plain white from the pillowcases for those size squares, and even some of the 2.5-inch squares here. Some of the 2.5-inch squares you can see I was using some of the embroidery, cutting pieces a little smaller, but others I just had big open white areas. So I contacted the client and I asked if she had any more pillowcases or things that she was wanting to incorporate in this quilt, because I had plenty of room for them. I can use them. So let me show you some of the things that she found for me to use. Here is a little table topper, little round. It would be a doily if it's crocheted, but I don't know if you call it a doily. But you can see how this is like cross stitch there, and then this nice crocheted edge, just so intricate. And I have tried to use these edgings on some of the quilt. Let me show you. So here's one where I just took the edging and put it on top of a white piece and then just stitched it down. There's another one that I actually put on the edge. See if I can find it. Yeah, this one I incorporated into the seam right here. I incorporated that one into the seam so it just runs down the edge of it. But the crocheted parts were so intricate, I just felt that they needed to be at least parts of them included into the quilt as well. So I will try to do that with some of these. So that's the first thing that she gave me, and so I can cut these. I'll probably do some 2.5-inch squares out of these, because if I tried to do the larger rectangle, it's really just going to take the middle of that. I'll see what I need, what I can use from that one. Here's another one. And I might even use some of this tea towel down the side, just because of the history of it. And this is embroidery instead of the cross stitch. So really cute. Now look at this one. This one's so cute. Has a spinning wheel on there. So this one may be able to use one of the larger blocks. I may swap out something else and put this one in there. Really cute. Now some of this has some stains on it, and she said even if I need to use the stain part, that's history. I don't see a problem with using it, and she didn't either. So if I need to use part of that, she said I was welcome to. Then she also had a couple sets of pillowcases. So here's some pink flowers. And again, a nice crocheted edge on there. And this is embroidery. Really, really, really so nice. Nicely done. So there's 2 of those. And then there's 2 more, and look at this embroidery. Look at that satin stitch all filled in there. Let me look in the back side. Just really, really nice. And to be honest, I can't tell whether that is hand stitched or machine stitched. I don't know. So 2 sets of these. So now that I've gotten these from her, I'll be able to finish up working on putting this whole quilt top together. My pattern fell on the floor, but let me share with you again. This is a Carolyn Forster pattern. I received this one from a client who had done this quilt and then was finished with the pattern, so she passed it on to me. I will put Carolyn Forster's email and things in the description below, so if you're wanting this pattern, I don't know if it's still available. The name of the pattern was called Floral Flourish. So I'm excited to get started on this one again. A great way to use up these textiles and things that you might find in your cedar chest or passed down to you, because most people aren't going to use these on their beds anymore, and so a way that we can use them and finish them is to put them in a quilt like this, and so they're really cute. Really, really cute. So I'm excited to get started on that. So those are my updates on the projects I've been working on. How about we move on to some long arm finishes? So I have 3 quilts lined up on the ladder. I have a couple more set on the desk over there. So let's start. I have another Grandparent panel like I showed you last week. Marsha's been busy with those. So let me show you that one first, and let me insert some larger pictures so you can see the overall quilt, and then we'll talk about the design. So the first 2 Grandparent quilts that I showed you last week, Marsha was giving to grandparents for a baby shower gift. And so this week, this is going to a new grandma. It's not one of her family members. It's a good friend of the family that has become a grandma for the first time, and so she created this one. Now this one is all in pinks. If you remember the one last week, the 2 last week were the oranges and the teals, really pretty. But this is the same panel. So you can see how this quilt is so cute because you can use the same panel and just change the color scheme, and it creates just a whole different quilt. So these are all very similar pinks and roses to the Pressed Flowers Quilt Along that I was working on. All the small squares. There is a light pink border around the panel, and then all 2.5-inch square, I assume 2.5. Looks like 2.5 to me, around, all the way around. Then the backing fabric, this is actually a breast cancer pattern, but it fits in so well, I don't think that's really noticeable. If you're interested in this fabric, it is called Sweet Bed of Roses by Gregg. It's a Northcott print, and it's called Quest for the Cure, it was also on there. All right, so you can see the pantograph. I did a little bit larger heart print, and I didn't want to overpower the words again, so I did a little bit larger. I think it's really cute. So size-wise, about the size of my fist is the size of that heart. This is called Apricot Moons. No, this is called Deer Heart. It's a different one. This one is called Deer Heart, and let me show you the printout of it. A little easier to see on that. So it actually stitches out this direction so that it goes across the quilt that way, but you can see how it nests in with the one above it very easily, and it looks really cute. So on this quilt, I did it side to side. I was trying to remember if I loaded it sideways. I did not. I loaded it like this and went straight across. Now this is a light pink thread, and you can see it on the black there. You can kind of see the light pink. Just really pretty, so soft. This will be so fun. I just love this idea for these to be at Grandma's house. And this is the quilt that the baby gets to lay on when it comes to Grandma's house. I just really like that. So, really, really cute. All right, let's move on to Marsha's second quilt, and let me insert some pictures, and then we'll talk about it. All right, this one was some quilt blocks that Marsha found, I assume at an antique store or secondhand store or something like that. And she said her daughter was really interested in them, and so she picked them up and told her daughter she would finish them for her. The fabric was interesting because it is very, very stiff. You can tell they put a lot of starch when they were trying to stitch these. And this was all hand-pieced blocks. And so it's not very large. Let me see, 29 by 29. So this will just be a nice table topper, or over the, you know, the back of a chair or something like that. But you can see the block right there is the blue with the arrows and then the side sashing. But when you join it all with the other blocks, then you get that secondary design with those. What up here is the arrow in the corner, the triangle in the corner. When those blocks intersect, those 4 blocks intersect, then it creates that diamond. Really neat. Wouldn't this be neat as a full bed quilt to have those diagonal lines going across and the blue cornerstones there in the middle? Now, being antique blocks, you can see it's not perfect. It's not perfect, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but you can see Marsha, I know, was real frustrated that these weren't lining up, but that's what happens with hand piecing. They didn't have the tools that we have now. They're working with some, you know, fabrics. I'm sure that's why they put so much starch in it, is try to get those fabrics so that they weren't as stretchy and they could to sew on them a little easier. But that's the history. It's just, that's part of it. It's so really cool. So Marsha just chose a gray background, but on that gray background you can really see the quilt design. So I chose, she asked for something swirly because the front was, you know, pretty angular. So she asked for something swirly. I did this pretty tight because it was a smaller piece, and really just to kind of stitch down all those bumps and things that were along the way. So this is called Swirl of Thorns, and it's a nice tight circular print, but then when it comes out, you can see when the swirl comes out here, you get about to here, and it kicks out this little thorn, if you want to say, in the back around here, and you kick out this little thorn. If you are a long arm quilter that is you're hand guided, this is a pretty easy stitch. I did this a lot when I was doing hand guided work, and because it's just an extra little dimension to just your normal swirl in and out. You can, you know, as you're coming out, then you just stop, do a little kick back and stop, you do a little kick back and then keep going. And then your other ones can nest in beside it. So you can even see as it's coming out here, coming back in, then it kicks back out again, does another one and goes around. So if you're doing hand guided, don't feel like you have to have it exact. I mean, this is a machine that's doing this, so everything is perfectly nested inside each other. When you're doing hand guided, you do, you know, you work yourself in, you know, sometimes you'll get yourself into a corner and you can echo yourself back out and then you can swirl in. It doesn't have to be in straight lines like this is. It turns out beautiful. I know a lot of times when I was doing hand guided, you'd think, oh man, they're gonna notice that I'm working myself out of a corner or that this isn't uniform. It turns out pretty. So enjoy the process and don't try to be perfect. But that is a design you can do on a hand-guided machine as well. So really, really cute. The reds and the grays and the blues kind of feels kind of Confederate type time period, doesn't it? Civil War, Confederate time. I doubt it's that old, but that's just the feel it gives to me. So really cute. All right, so let's move on to some larger quilts. I'm going to start with Loretta's next, and I'll pull that one down while you look at some pictures. I love this quilt. Loretta is a member of her local Daughters of the American Revolution, and so she has created this as a Quilt of Valor quilt. I don't know if she's using it in her if they're giving it away in her organization or if she's actually giving this to the Quilts of Valor Foundation. But either way, it's a great project. Another great use of a panel, if you notice that in the pictures. So let me show you the panel in the middle. Really not even, maybe not even a panel, but yardage. But it could be used as a panel if you had a panel like this as well. But this may just be yardage, not necessarily a panel, but she's bordered it with a darker blue border. You can see that. And then all around the edges, she's done this churn dash block. And I just think it's really, really cute. I like this use of smaller sashing in between the blocks. And then if you noticed also in the picture, the large red, you could call it sashing, I guess, between those top blocks. But it's up at the top and it is also down at the bottom. So when you lay the quilt out, it almost looks like it's running down behind the panel itself, which is a really neat effect. So you can see the churn dash blocks there, the red and the blue, then the firework print in there. I think all of the blue is this flag print. Really, really cute. But then the sashing is a darker blue. It has a little bit of a black line in it, but it's a little hard to tell. That's what the darker blue is. And then the red is just a red solid, the same red solid that's used in the churn dash blocks. Not all of the reds are the same, so this is actually just a solid red. There is another one that is more of a, well, you can see the red here is more of a little bit of a pattern to it, very light though. But really nice. Then the back is another one of my favorite fabrics. I have some of this or very similar to it in my stash too. So the red trucks with the American flags, really love it. I love these old red trucks. I hope someday to have one. I don't even care if it runs. I just want it as a decoration out in my yard so I can hang some quilts off of it. I just think it's so cute. I don't care if it has an engine or not. I just want that old red truck to sit out in my yard. So that's the backing fabric. So let me show you the pantograph. You can see it a little bit better on the front, especially on this red. This is called West Wind Fireworks. So it's got some swirls. It's got the burst of fireworks. Let me show you the pantograph. And then it's a little easier to pick out when you see the design itself. So here's what it looks like. This is one pass, not one pass. I mean, this is one design and then it's repeated and that's how it looks as a repeating pattern. So another great one that nests together real easy. It's very hard to see where it even fits right there, but you've got the fireworks burst and then a lot of the swirls. Again, this is something that you might try if you are a hand-guided quilter. You could do some sort of, that's be the hard part, is to make that symmetrical. But even if you did this, you could always use, I've seen like take a cookie cutter. If you have some sort of star shape like this and just lightly dip it into some chalk dust, and then you could put that on your quilt top, and then put them in several places around your quilt top, and then you can try to, as best you can, stitch or use a ruler or something, and then as you travel to the others, you can do this echoing back and forth and the swirl shape we were just talking about a minute ago. Really cute. All right, so let me show it to you on the quilt again. And I did it in a white, just a tad bit of an off-white thread because there was a lot of white. Let me do it on this side. Because there was a lot of white, I didn't want to go too creamy color, but just enough that it kind of blended in with the reds and the blues as well. Just not so stark. A pure white would have been very stark on top of those red and blues. So by doing just a tad bit of an off-white, it still blends in with this and isn't as bright on the solid colors. A lot of fun. Oh, just love summertime. Love the fireworks. I love June and July, even into August. Just love the warm weather, the warm nights, and the fireworks and everything. It'll be here before we know it. So love, love, love this. All right, so that is the Loretta's quilt. And then I have 2 donation quilts from my local guild that I'm a part of that I volunteered to Long Arm Quilt. And so let me pull down the first one and we'll talk about it. So both of these quilts are the same design. They're a little bit different size, and I don't know if that's by the number of blocks that was added, because they're close enough in size. I don't think it's by the number of blocks. It may be by the size of the strips used. I really don't know. I didn't study it that hard. But so this one, like I said, this is a donation quilt from my local quilt guild. And as a member of the guild, we like to create donation quilts. So some people will donate the fabric, others will donate their time to put the top together, and then I like to donate my time to do the long arm quilting. There is binding included with this that matches the top, and then I won't do the binding part. I'll pass that on to the next person so that they can do that part. But it's a really fun. And then we donate these to local shelters or nursing homes, or whoever's in need of quilts is what we'll do. So this one is all blue batiks. This reminds me of Florida, sky and water. Just makes me, like I said, I like warm weather, so it just makes me want to hop on a plane and fly to Florida. But just love the blue prints, just very summery feel as well, just the blues. They're all batiks, like I said, and then there's a white print here. This white has a little bit of a white tone on tone, almost a grayish little dots on that. So what I wanted to show you was this block. So you can see right here, we are creating what's really a log cabin block, but we've seen quilts like this before where you start in the corner and just add the sashings out here. And I know I've talked about those kind of quilts before. So it's the log cabin theme, but instead of having your square in the middle and adding on all 4 sides, we have the square on one corner. And so if this is a 2.5 inch square, this is a 2.5 inch square, and then here is a 2.5 by 4.5. And then you come over here and add this one, which is a 2.5 by 4.5. And then you increase it by 2 inches again. This would be a 2.5 by 6.5. Okay, and then what I want you to see is then it changes. So we have this block right here, okay? Then we have changed the idea by then going back with a 1 white square on this corner up here. So this one, I'm trying to see where they added. So this is a blue was added next. So that would be if this is 2, 4, 6, this would be an 8.5. So 2.5 by 8.5 is added on this side now. So instead of going over here. So on this side, and then there's a 2.5 by, this may be a 2.5 by 6.5, 2, 4, 6. So this would be a 2.5 by 6.5. This would be a 2.5 by 8.5 added across the bottom. A 2.5 by 8.5, 1, 2, 3, 4. So a 2.5 by 8.5 here. Then we again have a 2.5 by 8.5, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm counting this length of it. And then we have this in the middle, or at the end. So what you would do with this last strip is you would join this 2.5 inch square with this 8.5 inch print right here. And then that would go all across the top. So again, just another slight variation on a log cabin quilt, but look at the design, how that changes the look of it. And yeah, what I was looking to see is if they put, when they laid out the design, if they put that white square in the same spot on the quilt top each time, and they don't. So here it's in the upper left-hand corner, but this block down here, they've put it in the bottom right-hand corner. And I would have to look at the big picture again to see the entire layout of that. All right, so I stopped my filming and I went back and looked at the picture to see how they laid out the design. And what I noticed is that in each row, they start, or in a row, they start with the 2.5 inch square in the upper left-hand corner, and then the next block it's in the lower right-hand corner. The next block is in the upper left, and then the lower right. And then the next row, they switch that up again, still in the same spots, but they would start with the bottom right-hand corner and then the top left-hand corner. So let me insert a picture of the quilt again here for you so that you can see how that is laid out by the blocks, and I'll let you study it for a minute. So it's a real simple block. I mean, we've all done the log cabins, but you're doing just that little bit of difference by adding the sashing again around the outside and that one 2.5 inch square, and then alternating it where you're putting it in the design. It just changes the whole feel of a quilt. A traditional block now becomes a new one. So let's talk about the pantograph. So this pantograph is called Apricot Moon Bubbles. I stitched this in a light gray thread, and I really chose this design because the batiks had a lot of circular prints in them, and I just felt it just kind of complemented the fabrics there, and the whole blue feel made me think of water, I don't know, just an oceany feel, so I thought the bubbles was a good circular contrast to all the straight lines, and then kind of mimic the fabric that was there. And you can see it even better on the backing fabric. This is just a solid blue. Now this pantograph, if you're a long arm quilter and you have digital machine, this is a super easy pantograph because as you're doing a row, the next row down actually overlaps the row above it, and so there's no points to match up if you're rotating it, and nothing has to be exact because that the bottom circles come up and overlap the top circles. There is some back stitching on this one. You can kind of see right here where this stitching is a little darker. That's because as the design stitches, and I can't remember the exact path, but it doesn't do one whole circle and one whole circle. It actually comes in, does part of this one, goes around, maybe stitches back over it or something like that. So you can tell when there's just a little bit thicker white, it's not white, it's actually a light gray, but where there's a little bit thicker, that's because there's a back stitch. It's usually not a problem when you're stitching it unless your thread breaks or something and you're starting again. Sometimes if it's not exactly right, you'll be able to tell that, and I'm sure there's spots on this quilt where you can. But it's not one row that stitches a back stitch over the row of previous, it's only in the same row that it'll back stitch. So unless you bump the machine or have an area where you had to start again and you're going over that area again, would it create a problem if it's not perfect? So, all right, and so this is the first donation quilt. And like I said, I will leave the binding part of it for somebody else in the guild to do. And then let's move on to the second donation quilt. This is the exact same pattern, but with different fabrics. And here are some pictures of that one. Okay, so like I said, this is the exact same pattern, and this time instead of white we have this this tannish, creamish color. It's a tonal. It's got just a tad bit of a print, not really a print, but just kind of a shading to it, and that is used for the same thing in each block. The starting out the 2.5 inch square, and then also the final one that's added into the block. These are all kind of teal greens. They all have sort of a vine type theme to them. You can see this one has some vines in it. This one has some vines with little golden buds on it. Then this light teal one has some vines in it. So you can see the pantograph I chose has vines in it too. So this one's called Trellis, and I love the swirls in it. I love the leaves that are incorporated in it. I felt like that one just really complemented the fabrics in this, and again added some circular movement to it for a quilt that's very straight, blocky, very straight edges to it. So let me show you this pantograph. This is a design by Patricia Ritter. Across the top there you can see that's how the row stitches out, and then this is very tight the way it printed out. It does not stitch out that tight, and this would be, you know, like the whole top half of your quilt right there at the bottom part. But you can see how it nests together. You can kind of see where right here where it would, the next row, but pretty, yeah, it works really well on a quilt. Really like this one. Kind of a classy type of look, very garden feel, just a soothing quilt. This would look really pretty over the end of a bed. And again, the same design, how they laid out each row. And then for the thread on this one, I chose a thread that matched this cream color, almost an almond color fabric here, so that it blended in really well with those colors. And then it did also blend really well with the backing fabric. This is the backing. It's more of a golden print with some splotches of brown and little bits of the green or the teal. And then really on the back, you're just seeing that thread matches so well that you're really just seeing the texture from that. But that gives you a really good idea of what that pantograph looks like. Really pretty. Very classy, very English type garden type feel to this one. Really pretty. I can imagine someone's gonna enjoy that quilt there. So that's all my long arm finishes for this week, and I'm so glad you've joined me here today. My motto is every quilt is worth finishing. So whether you are working on your first quilt and you're wondering is it even good enough to finish, or whether it's your 100th quilt and you're wondering, should I even pay to have it long arm quilted, or you're finding quilt tops in your grandmother's cedar chest, my motto, every quilt is worth finishing. So I hope if you're needing long arm quilting services that you'll contact me. I have the long arm prep and quilt instructions, long arm prep and order form instructions in the comments below. That'll give you all the information you need on how to get your quilt to me and the things I would need there. And I hope I get to work on something for you. So I hope you have a great week, and we will see you back here next week.